Okay, so we're back in Maya, and what we need to do is basically set this up. So let's make sure we're in the right mode. Yeah, so if I hit 6, that basically is this part here puts us into textured mode, so we can actually see the textures that are going on. And essentially, now that we've got this material set up and we've got this, we've got things like our metallicity and roughness checked, it means we can start to feed some of our textures that we've made into here. So if we want to put, so the texture sampler here is basically the albedo, it's the base texture. So that's the first one we're going to load in. So if we click on this checkerboard, it basically asks us to select a file, and within that file, image name, we need to go and find the folder. So remember, we're using, in the case of my model, but yours may be different, I'm in the models folder and I've got this folder called test chair, and within that are all the textures that have been saved. So I'm going to select the AL, which is the albedo, and I'm going to hit open, and as soon as I click off it, you'll be able to see it. And now there's no lighting or anything in here, so all the other maps that we put in won't take an effect until we add the lighting. So we'll feed them in, and then we'll put some lighting in, and then we'll be able to preview it. So the next one is the normal map sampler. So if we go again, click on that, hit file, go and find the normal map. So that's NRM, and as you can see, it makes no difference. You can either click off or you can click this to click back into the level above. There's no effect on it because there's no lighting. However, because I haven't fed the rest of these maps in, if I put the lighting in now, it won't look right anyway. So let's feed the rest of the maps in. File, and we want to put the metal map in there. So hit open, and back, and then roughness. Last one to go in. Hit open. And then we go, we've got our full set of maps. So now, with lighting, you can basically use the normal lights. You can just go here and create a light and drop a light in. Or you can use, within these Colada tools, they have a generate 3-point light rig. So if you hit that, then essentially what it will do is it will generate this light group for you. You can move this wherever you want. It makes absolutely no difference. And if you want to control it, the temptation would be to select it and then start to play with some of these values. But what you'll find is they don't make any difference. And that's because essentially this is like a group. So again, this is why it's a good idea to have this outliner on the side, because you can see there's my test chair. And then I've got this group here, Colada lights all. If I click on this plus icon, you can see there's a key light, a fill light, a rim light, and an ambient light. And essentially, if I click on any of these, I can then go to this key light shape, and I can start to affect the brightness of any of these things to get a sense of the object. I can change the colour if I want. I can get something more dramatic. But again, you're just using these to preview, so it's not. Let's do that as fun. And you can see the normal map is working, and generally it's doing more or less what you would expect it to do. The other thing to note though is the metalness. So if we look at all the elements that are meant to be metal on this, they don't look as probably quite right, and there's a thing with this shader that basically, if we get back onto it, one of the things you have to set when you're setting the metal is you have to use this material specular colour. It basically takes its specular from a colour sample rather than directly from the albedo. So if I take this and change the colour of this to something like pink, you can see that there's like a pink running through it. It's probably not the best example for this. But basically, this basically means this metal would come through looking pink. So you have to pick a colour which is close to the material you're trying to create. So if you wanted to do something which is more like a brass or something like that, you need to have something which is in this sort of, more in this sort of spectrum of colour, maybe, to get the colour you're after, or sample it from somewhere else on the texture that you want. But say you want something like that, then you're going to get a material. The material will bounce. The colour of the metal will be that colour. So that's just a weird thing that you need to be aware of when using, if things don't look quite right. But essentially, our chair's made and it's ready to go. Now, when you export this out, you probably don't want to export the light. So you can either delete it, or in fact delete it from here, because then it'll actually go, or you can exclude it from the export, which is what I'm going to show you how to do. One thing to note with PhyreEngine in the version of the exporter, the Colada Exporter that we're using at the moment, there is an issue with doing export selected. So for the most part, that won't really bother you, because if you're building single assets, you won't have anything else in the scene. But if you're building something bigger like a level and you wanted to remove sections from it, it's something you need to consider, because whenever you export it, it just exports everything in the scene. There are ways around it though, but I'm not going to cover them necessarily in this video. So select our object, go to export. So I can, even if I press export selection now, it will export everything out of this scene. So we want to export this test chair, and again, I could use these tools. There's a thing for generating the mesh, but I would rather have a bit more control over it. So I'm going into Media Models Test Chair. I'm using the Colada Exporter, and that's the Colada Exporter that basically is in capital letters. And under General Options, I'm making sure we make sure Relative Paths is on, and if you want to filter the export, you can basically switch off lights, and joints and skin, and all this stuff, the stuff that you don't want to export. But if you switch lights off, then essentially you can save it out with the lights, and it won't take them with it. So let's do test_chair, export selection, and FX compilation successful for file, blah 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 blah, shaders, using the right shaders, la la la. So we're sorted. That's it. So let's just save this scene again, so that if anything goes wrong, things can crash. We know this. So then we're going to try and open this up in the PhyreEngine next.